The casting of the new Fantastic Four in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has happened. It's been out for a little while, and in fact, a lot of the castings, or maybe all of them, were rumored and kind of leaked out there for a bit. But what I wanted to talk about today was something that I think is actually very important beneath the surface of the casting, in particular of Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, because Reed Richards is a character with a lot of significance and importance to the Marvel Universe, and considering the current state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Robert Downey Jr. exiting as Iron Man and also some others like Chris Evans, I think it's a time right now where the Marvel Cinematic Universe needs Reed Richards more than ever. But is Pedro Pascal going to be up to the challenge of filling what the hearts and souls of MCU fans everywhere truly need?
What is up, true believers?
What is up, true believers? It's Mason here with Comics and Crosses, where we discuss the eternal truths behind our modern mythology. And today, I wanted to talk about the casting of Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, the leader of the Fantastic Four. In particular, what I want to talk about that you might not be hearing everywhere else is, will this character fill the gaping need that's in the hearts of MCU fans everywhere? Now, to the uninitiated, the MCU is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's all these movies that we've been watching of the Avengers, of Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, that all have culminated in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, right? And so there's been movies since then, but Phases 4 and 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, most of the content that's come out has really kind of fallen short. Audiences have been introduced to a lot of new characters while not really finding the same sort of iconic, great characters that launched the universe in the first place. Now, if you've watched the Infinity Saga, you know that Robert Downey Jr. was really like the centerpiece, the main character of that entire saga of films. He appeared in several other movies that were not exactly Iron Man movies. He was in Avenger movies, and he was really the wit and charm and leader in a way. We as audience members saw Iron Man, and he's the one that you connected with. He's the one who was the funniest, who was the most charming, and almost the most flawed. He was written well. He went through an incredible arc from his first movie, maybe drinking a little too much, billionaire genius who's had everything kind of given to him in life, to ultimately being the hero and the responsible one, father of all of these heroes and all of this MCU. And for the audiences, in a way, especially for young audiences, feeling kind of like that's the man, that's the dad type character that I could look up to. Now, you may be saying, I've never looked at Robert Downey Jr. as my father. That's kind of crazy. And I totally get it. What I'm trying to speak to is kind of the emotional beats of the ongoing story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I would argue that the things that resonate most with us are the things that are the most universal, that make us the most human, right? And that there are a lot of biblical themes and ideas that I think are implanted by a divine creator himself. I set all this up to talk about Reed Richards by first addressing Iron Man, because Iron Man was the through line in all of these movies, and we watched him go from being a kind of bratty, spoiled, immature man who ultimately did the right thing at the end of the day, to really taking a responsibility for the well-being of the universe as he saw it, and rising to the occasion and ultimately sacrificing himself, spoiler warning, in Endgame to save all of the other heroes and, in fact, all of the world. There we see a Christ-like figure laying his life down, sacrificing so that the others could live. Now, Iron Man is gone. Our central, even maybe Christ-like figure in this story, the one who's had the greatest journey, who's been the most flawed and risen to the highest heights of altruism and heroism and self-sacrifice, that character is gone, okay? In these movies now, that's a big gap. I mean, Black Widow's dead, okay? Thor is Chris Hemsworth's probably not going to come back to play that character. I think he's done with it. Hulk is kind of walking around as half Hulk, kind of smart Hulk. Captain America, Steve Rogers, is presumably dead or gone. We don't really know what's going on there. He got old. Okay, now the Fantastic Four is one of Marvel's oldest, most signature properties, okay? This family of four, these characters, which includes Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm, the Thing, represent the first family of Marvel, usually depicted as wholesome, as a unit, as committed and loving to one another, going on wild adventures, almost like a Saturday morning cartoon kind of feel to them. Now, their stories can get very dark, especially with Doctor Doom, with, some of the villains that they encounter. But Reed Richards is the leader of the Fantastic Four. He's the dad. I mean, even in comics, Sue Storm and Reed Richards actually have children. They're actually raising a family. There's Uncle Johnny, the Human Torch. So enter this character where we've had a whole bunch of new characters introduced in Phase 4 and 5, right? And a lot of them, more obscure. A Moon Knight who's been around, been popular for some time, but doesn't have the cachet of the Fantastic Four. A lot of these characters that never had Saturday morning cartoons at some point made about them so that the general public would recognize who they are. The Fantastic Four have been around since the 60s, and Reed Richards being the leader of that team, of a real major brand, means that he's set up to be somebody who can really lead the MCU forward. You may be thinking, I thought Spider-Man was going to lead the MCU forward. And really, if you look at Spider-Man Far From Home, that movie in particular did really set up Peter Parker to sort of have the torch handed to him and for him to take on the hero mantle. There's a lot of talk about who's going to step up and be the next Tony Stark or be the new Avengers. There was that real sense of that void. But it's been years and even another movie since that storyline came out, and it's sort of probably been forgotten and dropped at this point. There's also Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange may seem like he's supposed to be the MCU's new dad because he's kind of mature. He's a man in his, 40s, 50s. He sort of looks after Peter in a little bit of a way in Spider-Man No Way Home. He has some connection to the old and is still moving forward in the new. He had a movie, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is maybe one of the more successful films in Phase 4 or 5 whenever it came out. Those are people that you might be thinking, aren't they going to carry the MCU forward? But here's some knocks against Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. For Peter Parker's Spider-Man, Tom Holland's character, there's a weird deal with Sony that makes it difficult. So Marvel Comics, or Marvel, when they were kind of down in the dumps and close to bankruptcy, had to sell off the rights, the movie and TV rights, to a lot of very popular characters, such as the X-Men, such as Spider-Man. And so some of the movies that we've seen, like with Tobey Maguire, with, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, these kind of X-Men, Spider-Man movies of the early 2000s, were actually produced by Sony and not by Marvel. Although Disney has got back the rights to X-Men, they don't have the rights to Spider-Man. So they always have to work in conjunction with Sony whenever there's a movie made. As you might imagine, that makes for some big mucky mucks to have meetings, for contracts to have to be drawn out, for deals to be made. And so it's actually kind of complicated. And so there's been some talks recently about issues there. On the subject of Dr. Stephen Strange, you could say that both of his movies were pretty successful. He's a character who was a part of the whole Infinity Saga, Infinity War, and Endgame, and played an important role. He's introduced fans to the world of magic in Marvel. However, Doctor Strange is not a terribly popular character. When it comes to comics, when it comes to now movies, he's really a secondary character that plays an interesting role in a bigger plot. However, he's not really the kind of main guy that you build everything around. I would say that in the little bit we have seen of him, like his interaction with Peter Parker and his friends in say, No Way Home, he doesn't really seem like he cares for kids or like he's ready to be any kind of mentor. Okay, so I know that's a lot of setup. I know that's a lot to kind of talk about where we are now. But considering all these things, we now have Reed Richards, we have the Fantastic Four entering the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we have Pedro Pascal. Now, on the actor himself, Pedro Pascal is a great actor. I've enjoyed a lot of things he's in. He's been in Narcos. He's been in Game of Thrones. He's been in The Last of Us. He's been in some great sci-fi and fantasy kind of series. I will say, though, that Pedro Pascal is one of these actors who is typically in roles where he has a presence, but you don't particularly know him for his dialogue. I just want you to think back about Pedro Pascal and the different things he's done, the different roles, places you've seen him, and he's not a character actor. Now, I'm not saying there's not exceptions, but in general, Pedro Pascal is somebody who plays a tough, good-hearted guy. Not to say that an actor can't step outside of what they're used to and have a career redefining role. Certainly that's possible. It could happen. But Pedro Pascal is not the person I think of when I think of Reed Richards. Reed Richards is the smartest man alive. He's Mr. Fantastic. He's a father, a leader. And you might be saying, well, Pedro Pascal has played these characters where he's had to care for a young person. So he's like a father. That's easy. Well, he's sort of been a begrudging, I will tolerate children because I just can't bring myself to let them die kind of character. The Mandalorian, The Last of Us, his relationship with the younger characters in those cases, one of them being a puppet alien, is not particularly warm or close. They're built kind of around duty. And while Mr. Fantastic is sort of a distant person in his own way, he is a warm father when you see him in the comics. He's doing his best. He has a hard time in his marriage and probably a hard time in his family life a bit because he is so cerebral. He is such a intelligent, constantly almost a worrier who just can't let go of a mystery. And so he is, for right or wrong, always trying to solve everything. Brilliant, curious, driven, but virtuous person who struggles with his personal relationships, but they are what anchor him. And ultimately, he keeps himself from being entirely cerebral and entirely zeros and ones and entirely bottom line based because of the people in his life. And he makes his decisions almost always, or perhaps always, based on the people he loves, the people close to him. They keep him grounded. They make him human, where he otherwise would be a computer. Now, here's why I think that character of Reed Richards is ultimately what the MCU needs right now in replacement of Robert Downey Jr. and some of these other characters. Think about it. It is 2024. We live in a world where most young people, most young adults, people who would be flocking out to see these movies are data-based, are disconnected from other humans, are mostly locked in their heads with all kinds of information and computer ways of processing even their friendships. People struggle with connecting to people one-on-one. They'd rather chat in a chat room. They'd rather comment on videos. They'd rather be on X or be on Instagram, checking things and thinking about things. If you think about it, society's become very mind over actual experience. But I think everyone ultimately in their hearts still feels grounded to the people, the family, the friends in their lives. Those are the people that keep us all human. This is a great opportunity for Reed to personify that desire, that struggle even for intimacy and for a groundedness to real human beings as the ultimate important thing in our lives. There's great potential again for a main MCU character to be that kind of adult person who grows into the father parent that we all want to be, want to see, and makes the decisions we all know we need to make. Here's where I think this could go wrong. If Pedro Pascal does not have the emotional range necessary for this role, if his character does not go on a true arc of growth, if we cannot relate to his flaws and root for him, and if he is not ultimately the one who saves the day, then we might be in a case where this falls flat. There is no one to really connect to or really look up to and admire their plight to the top of heroism, and that void that was left by Robert Downey Jr. and some of the other heroes will persist. So these are my thoughts on the character of Reed Richards, on the casting of Pedro Pascal, and what I think the MCU desperately needs right now. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Is there another character that either is already in the MCU that you look to as that main centerpiece character who will take the whole franchise forward? Or is there another character coming out who you think will be that character? So let me know. What do you think? I appreciate you listening to the video and tuning in. Share this with anybody you think might want to be part of the discussion. And I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.